Sorry.
Oh man.
No, if I could have thrown those up at 9 o'clock or something, we would have been.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, but
this is a good time for our listeners to be invited into our pre-show discussion. Occasionally we actually prep stuff. Today was one of those days, but we did it at about 10:58.
Yeah.
But it's still really good. How are you, man?
Good. And you mean 10:58 Chicago time?
Central time. Yeah.
Central,
sorry.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
just afternoon. So it's just afternoon on the East Coast.
2 minutes ago.
We can get started. I see people coming in. So anyway, so I think actually we should start there. We have a bunch of fun viewer questions, and we'll get there. But I want to start with something that you pulled out, and I actually did the thing. I had a phone call right up until our meeting, and so I looked at the top line and said, "That's great." But you did the thing where you said, "I'm going to start connecting numbers under the hood," and I want you to do that for our listeners. There's two really interesting polls that we talked about this week, and I'll write about them probably at the beginning of next week. But one is AP NORC talking about where Hispanics are, Latino voters are, and then the other is one of those massive PRRI surveys again. And once you start putting some of those numbers together, it's pretty wild, man. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, why don't you start with the Hispanic numbers on unfave with Trump?
So
I think
so
those
this is So this is an October survey. This is AP NORC, which is one of the better kind of under the hood look at numbers on Hispanic voters and voting patterns. I should say they also use the word Hispanic on this. I know it covers a pretty broad swath. 25% of Hispanic adults have a somewhat or very favorable view of Trump, down from 44% at the beginning of this year. So he's lost almost half his support there. But the interesting one is the percentage of Hispanic adults who say the country is going in the wrong direction is now at 73%, up from 63%. And his overall unfavorable with them is 65. He's 40 points underwater. Again, if you want just a historical comparison, in January 2025, he was only -9. It was 44.53. That has gone to 25.65. Joe, why is that?
Well, that's clear. I think it's both the mass deportation and also the fact that a lot of the people were voting, particularly in that community, were voting on the economic pain that they were going under, and that's increased under Trump, not decreased. And so that's why they're going, more in the wrong direction. And also, my guess is a lot of them are agreeing with what I'm about to put talk you through is the PPRI poll. They ask a very, and I'm really interested in these kinds of questions, similar to things that Zogby was asking about the president. But this one is, they asked a majority of the asked people this: President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. This is not like, some now 56, not an error, percent of the American people polled agree with that statement. And only 42% agree with President Trump as a strong leader who should be given the power he needs to restore America's greatness. So you have 56, and what's incredible about that is 65% of independents agree with the statement that President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. And you put that into the no kings equation here. If you were calling through the phone book and urging people to come with you to the No Kings rally, 65% of the independents you called, and so 2/3, so 2 of every 3 calls to an independent, and my guess is 9 of every 10 calls to a Democrat, would get a nodding head and would be listening to you about why they should go. The one group, obviously in the poll, not so much, would be the Republican Party, but even that had, a relatively small but significant number of Republicans who agree with it. So the really interesting thing, though, when I looked under this, because you start adding where the 56s line up and the 65s and see how deep things are. In the PPRI poll, they asked independents, why they held unfavorable views of each party. And it's kind of fascinating and kind of revealing. First of all, among the independents who are unfavorable to the Republican Party, 56% say it's because it's too extreme and too right wing. 59% of the independents who have unfavorable views of the Republican Party say it's because the party is too deferential to Trump. And then you go look over at the Democratic Party and why they have unfavorable views of Democrats. And those folks, independents who have unfavorable views of the party, one of the things that stands out is that 28% of independents who are unfavorable to the Democratic Party say it's because the party is not fighting hard enough against Trump. So you start pointing those things together, and it starts showing why 65% of independents say he's a dangerous dictator, why 56% of the country does, because even with the Republicans saying, no, he's not, that he's a strong leader and we need to let him make America great. That's how you get to the reason the numbers are moving so strongly against him is because groups like Hispanics, as at least as the AP Nord poll called them.
9 to 40 is a seismic. That is a cliff. I mean, and actually, all you got to do is look at in the AP News article, which we'll share. I mean, it looks like this.
Yeah,
I mean, it just goes straight down.
Yeah, it goes straight down, and it's the same thing that happened with independents. Now, with independents, the first time I noticed it was when Bondi went out and said there's no files, there's no list. And it started with that. I'm not saying that was it, but something happened that then cascaded as he put troops in the streets and things like that. And I think when you look at how do you get back? Okay, what do we think? How do we think
I know
Trump?
where you're going here.
What is Trump going to ask? How is Trump going to act differently to convince his people he's not a dangerous dictator that has to be stopped before he destroys democracy? I mean, wait, tearing down the White House, that'll do it, of course, right? I mean, this is like one of those, like, I mean, even if you were like, okay, you're the advisor, how are you going to do this? Well, first of all, he wouldn't listen to anybody, but second of all, no, this is who he is. It's like I think on yesterday we were saying, what did people expect was going to happen?
Well, and my other pet theory on this, I all your numbers make sense, but the thing that's backing it up underneath, and this is a quote from I think one of the workers that was polled by AP Norc, 30-year-old Hispanic male. He was relying on this nostalgia of, hey, remember before COVID, things weren't as expensive. But now it's like, okay, you're in office. I'm still getting done dirty at the grocery store. I'm still spending an insane amount of money. I'm trying to cut corners, but that bill is still insanely expensive. Even the people that might be willing to look past the dictator stuff, and by the way, I know you said it's at 65. I mean, it's 35% are totally okay with it.
Right.
But even among that 35, well,
there's a big chunk of I don't know, I'm not sure.
The don't know, not sure's, when you give them such a powerful question and they respond don't know, not sure, some of them, and maybe I would posit a good chunk of them, are willing to look past it if things are going great for them economically.
Oh, sure.
And they're not. Right. So that 65, you talk about the 65, what drives their actual, what they do in an election, what lever they pull. this is a pretty big sign that not only the numbers, I'm saying it's even worse because those economic numbers are just as bad, if not worse as well.
Yeah, but it also, the one thing I want to keep saying here is if you have 56% of the country believing he's a dangerous dictator or willing to say in a poll, remember, a lot of people might not want to say that to a pollster. I mean,
Right.
I mean, they don't know. Uh, maybe it's Trump's pollster calling them and they're about to put themselves on the enemies list. But my point is, whenever you have 56% of the country has actually come to the conclusion that he's a dangerous dictator
Yep.
who needs to be stopped before he destroys our democracy. 28% of independent, 65% of independents agreeing with that, and 28% of the independents who don't like the Democratic Party, it's because they're not fighting that hard
Right.
enough. What does 65 numbers and 56 numbers actually represent when then you then go look at the 7 million people who turned out to protest that? I mean, to say no kings, that we got to stop this dictator from doing more harm. There are a hell of a lot of spectators out there who need to start showing up. I mean, who agree with us, who get it, who are unhappy with the Democratic Party because they're not doing enough to stop it. Well, we can do enough to stop it by just showing up and being out there at the next one. Because, I mean, that's what I think that's what will start continuing. I think a lot of the people are starting to see, wait, there's more people like me out there. I mean, even hearing these numbers, I'm sure there are people listening to us right now, watching us right now, who, upon hearing 56% of the country believes what they believe, is a pretty powerful thing. So that's what we got to use that to turn spectators into standing with us.
So just 3 headlines that came across the transom this morning. Inflation picked up to 3%.
Yeah.
Here's one. This is an Reuters poll. Cost of living worries haunt Americans ahead of midterms. And then I don't think there will be another inflation report from BLS because other people are currently furloughed or not working. All of this points to, and we didn't even get into the economy stuff other than that brief, like what you're saying. I mean, by the way, you start finding similar numbers. 65%, and I think this is the PRI poll, the economy is headed in the wrong direction. I think it was at 65, which again is a high. You start adding all those up, and yeah, you can see on the screen that graph that I was about to talk about that went away. We'll get better at this. Look at where inflation is. It's bumped up. I mean, I will say this graph is somewhat misleading because it's so long. Like we're going back to 2005, and obviously you had the COVID inflation spike that makes you think the recent one isn't that bad. But it's because of tariffs. Consumer confidence is down. It ain't looking good, and the polling numbers back that up. Let's get to a few listener questions while we're here, Joe.
Sure.
Had some fun ones. I do want, we talked a little bit about no kings. I think this again kind of ties it all together, and I know we talked about that on the latest episode of that Trippi show, which is out as of this morning. I thought that was a fun one as well. We're doing those on video too, which there's a lot more of our faces in your lives now. And I, for one, think that is a terrible thing, but we're going to keep doing it because you seem to like it.
There's also a lot of ums and hums and that they can't cut out as good when we're on videos.
So this is Rodney in Queens, and I have an answer to this. Do you think the shutdown is hurting Republicans as much as it should be? Is it breaking through at all? Rodney, if you listened to last week's Trippi show, we have some awesome numbers on this, but essentially one of the things I always like to look at under the hood that I've learned from Joe over the years is you ask people who they blame for a problem, and you try to figure out when in a poll, who do you blame for X? And then in a question like the shutdown, it was, should one side compromise with the other? And if that number were somewhere in the mid 40s for Democrats should compromise, or even higher than that, then yeah, I would say the shutdown is not hurting Republicans that much and it's not breaking through. Those numbers say that a wide majority of the American people do not want Democrats to compromise on health care. And consistently, the Democratic messaging has been, your rates are going up November 1st. We are shutting down the government until we get this fixed. And even, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Joe, but Jeff Van Drew, one of the embattled incumbent Republicans, I believe he's New Jersey, he asked Trump for a 1-year extension of those ACA subsidies that are going away, and Trump said no. So even some of the Republicans in Congress know what's going on here.
Well, but also, you don't even need to look at those questions and the answers to those questions, right? What you need to look at is, okay, you asked for a 1-year extension. Trump said no. Guess what? There won't be an extension. Guess what? A lot of independents, something like 59% of them, don't like the Republican Party because they only do what Trump tells them to do. So that's playing into this. Also, the numbers that we just went through. If somehow the shutdown were helping Trump and the Republicans, you wouldn't see numbers saying he's a 56% that he's a dictator, or Hispanics, him going from 44 down to whatever. I mean, literally losing half his support with Hispanics, or independents. I mean, all of this. All these polls, these questions that we're just reading today happened like yesterday, like last few days. So the shutdown, and however it's impacting anything, is cooked in these numbers that we're telling you about. And by the way, I mean, to the bigger point, what if you believe that you don't like the Republican? I'm talking as an independent. You believe that you don't like the Republican Party because all they do is what Trump says, and you're watching or reading something where a Republican member of the House asks him for a 1-year extension for your health care, and he says no. It's reinforcing exactly everything that you believe about why you don't like the Republican Party. This is why they're going to have a huge problem in November of 2026. And it's also why they're trying to redistrict the hell out of everything and hoping the Supreme Court knocks down the Voting Rights Act so they can knock out minority districts too. But the one we didn't get to, Alex, was the Quinnipiac poll, I think that was yesterday or the day before, that showed the generic Democrat, which actually answers Rodney's question even more bigger. Okay, forget about what those questions about who do you blame, who do you not blame. What you need to know is during this entire period, the Quinnipiac poll came out and bumped up again to the Democrats having a generic +9 in the generic over the Republicans in the congressional generic vote, simulating next year's election if it were held today. That's a massive, massive number to have that. Now, whether that'll hold, that's a whole different story, but it does tell you whatever's going on with the shutdown is not hurting Democrats, and something is hurting Republicans. Maybe things like tearing down the White House. I mean, could be a whole lot of things, but the shutdown's definitely not helping them.
This is not like an argument you can make in a 30-second ad, but I think about it a lot. If you've got a majority of, by far, inflation is the most critical issue polled consistently. And by the way, the dangerous dictator stuff is creeping up. But if dangerous dictator is at 56, inflation's at like 62 or 63, I can't remember. But a lot of it's far and away the thing that is an anchor around their necks right now, beyond the dictator stuff. You would think that the administration would try to do like anything to stop or stem inflation. Instead, they're firing the head of the BLS, replacing him with a crony. They're cutting the subsidies that make things more expensive. And like tariffs are a tax that make things more expensive for people. Like all of that adds up to, okay, they're clearly not going to do anything to actually lower prices for the American people. Therefore, what are they going to do? And this gets to ICE and Alligator Alcatraz and Mike Johnson saying it's all just hate America stuff. Like they're now asking you to essentially pay the increased cost for waving the Trump flag.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
All right.
A
What
lot
other
of
questions do we have? Oh, this is fun. Joe, put your time machine hat back on. From Pausner in Maine. Guys on PodSave talking about Howard Dean's 50-state strategy. Joe, can you explain that? And do you think we need it right now?
That's a great question. The 50-state strategy, had it been implemented and stayed implemented from 2005, I think, when he became somewhere in there he became the chair of the party. We might not be in the situation that we're in today. That was a idea about building Democratic Party organizations in all 50 states, not giving up on places like Alabama and Idaho and now maybe in Iowa, which we pulled out of in terms of the caucuses there. So we actually went in the other direction. Basically, the strategy of the party became there's 3 battleground states, and that's all, or 6 or whatever they are, and we're not building the party anywhere else. In fact, forget about any states that are red, because it's a waste of resources, all that stuff. That's what happened. But the 50-state strategy was basically campaign everywhere, invest everywhere, make sure that state parties, even ones that were tiny, had some extra resources from the national party to at least start to build something a little stronger. What happened was what usually happens in the party. The Washington committees, and I mean the Democratic Congressional Committee and the Democratic Senate Committee, they tend to focus on those races that year that are real important. We're doing this again now, and now the problem is, no, I wouldn't. We need to start doing this, but I think in 2026 we've got to put every resource we can into the 18, the 19, the 20 seats that could decide the entire House, because that's where, if we don't win the House, if you think he's a dangerous dictator who must be stopped, that's not likely. If we don't win the House back, that there'll be any way to stop him from doing more damage, and damage that may not be, there's already a lot of damage that's not repairable. So was the 50-state strategy a good idea? Yes. Why was it never implemented? Because the party consistently focuses on whatever the battle is at the time, these 3 states, those 18 districts. And where I would say during all that time, that was a dumb strategy. We're now in a place where it may be the only strategy to save the House. So,
partially.
And then go. So if we win the damn House, and look, when you have these numbers that we're talking about, when you have generic +9 for Democrats, those are numbers that those are numbers, and we talked about this yesterday. I kept screaming at Alex, I'd like to get them at 12 which is near impossible, but let me dream, in time for November of 2026, because those numbers.
I can read a trend line, man. It's going to 12. It will be at 12, whether it holds. Give it another 2 months. It will be at 12 by the end of the year.
No, I actually think the way it gets there, we can talk about this, but look, when you're at 90% with Democrats, and you're at 56-60% with Republicans, with independents, excuse me, and 90% the other way, or 80% the other way with Republicans, you're kind of stuck at that 56, at the number we're at, because, are independents really going to break to 80 and become, vote like Democrats? They're already leaning harder than you think we can grow above that. So I actually think the only way to get to higher than a +9 is if Republicans, some of the Republicans that are still, not all MAGA, come to the conclusion he's dangerous, et cetera, and or some of them decide they're just not going to vote, because if you're +9 and the other side
Right.
doesn't vote, then you go up to 10, 11, 12. But my point was, at 9, you're not just talking at +9. You're not just talking about the House. You're talking about the Senate being in
You're
play.
talking about state Supreme Courts.
Yeah.
And yeah, to your point, no, the big one is the Senate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a couple more we'll get to next week. I know we're getting past the half-hour mark here. The one question I was trying to end with, Joe, how fucked are we this week? Seems like a little less. Seems like we had a pretty good week.
I think the same thing. We got to keep it up. You can't take any of the pressure off. Got to keep it full bore. And the other thing that does keep happening is he's got to continue to overstep. And I think tearing down the White House, the East Wing, was. I just think that there are a lot of people that's up there with burning the American flag for a lot of people who are bothered by that and don't see it as a right, a protest. But this wasn't a protest. This was just demolishing an icon, an American icon. I mean, just an iconic building that it's just crazy. But no, so I think a lot, and I think No Kings was a big success as well. So I think it was a good week.
All right, that'll about do it for us this week. Joe, we mentioned, go check out the pod this week. You can watch it on YouTube if you want. Everything lives on lincolnsquare.media. Anything else you want to plug?
Just two Joes. Me and Joe Klein have a show that comes out midweek, usually around Wednesdays, called The Two Joes, and it's a completely different show than Alex. Alex and I get into the polls and what's going on politically in each, in districts and happening in the week. Joe Klein and I kind of get into. He's a reporter who wrote Primary Colors, has been covering politics and wars. He's been in war zones for 40 years. And so we get into anything from, and we'll have guests. I mean, we're having, different guests than that Trippi show with Alex. So it's a different format, and we poke at each other, and we don't always agree. Not that Alex and I agree on everything either, particularly, days off and things like that. But anyway, we'll get.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.